So I'll say good evening and hello to all of you joining us. I assume that most are familiar with the format of the Monday class, but I'll run through it for those who might be joining for the first time. We start around now, and we'll finish in about an hour and a half's time. The evening will consist of some opening chanting, dedication of offerings, and the 3 refuges and 5 precepts. And then we'll have a sit of about half an hour to 40 minutes. Then we'll see what spontaneous reflections might come to the surface. And then we'll open up and allow people to share their thoughts, feelings, or suggestions or questions, whatever comes up. So there's an interactive element as well. It's very nice to see some of those whom I can see, whom I recognize. So hello again. And what I'll be doing, I'll be lighting some incense. We have some people here in the room, which is nice. As the pandemic recedes behind us, hopefully we'll have more people attending in person. Unfortunately, we don't have a camera for you to see the people who are in the room, but they can see you, so you've got to be on your best behavior. and sit upright. I'm only joking, make yourself comfortable. So I'll light some incense. I assume that those who are here, I have the incense already ready. Thank you, Mariana. Any objections to incense here? You're okay? Yeah, so I'll light some incense. I'll light the candles behind me, and we'll do the dedication of offerings together. You will have to be muted, I'm afraid, if you're online, because it doesn't really sound good when everybody's electronically being beamed in. But you will probably hear the quartet or quintet at the Buddhist Society doing the opening chanting. So there will be an opportunity to ask questions later on. And for those who are, I'll just say that if you're unfamiliar with this tradition, there is some bowing as well as chanting. The bowing and the chanting is quite optional. Just observe, see what comes up for you when you do see people bowing. You're very free and welcome to. I can say a few words about bowing later on. Really, it's just a sign of respect and an acknowledgement that there's a bigger picture somewhere in the background, which we're all, in our different ways, waking up to, I hope. I have an amazing gong here. It would serve a big temple, a really big temple. So I'll ring the gong. I don't know if you'll hear it, but there's always the form to... Yep. This is a moment when one can dedicate this evening's practice to relative, friend, member of the family or community who might be unwell. Could be the war in the Ukraine, all those people suffering. Could be Syria, Turkey. The list is endless of suffering in the world. So our practice basically can be dedicated to the alleviation of suffering in the conditioned realm. So we'll have a screen share, thanks to Randula, who's joining us online. And we'll start with the dedication of offerings on page 2 for those who are using the book. Maybe page 2 and 3. Yoso Bhagava Araham Samma Sambuddho Swakato Yena Bhagavata Dhammo Supatipanno Yasa Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Tamayam Bhagavantam Sadhammam Sasangham Imehi Sakare Hiyataraham Aropitehi Abhipujayama Sadhuno Bante Bhagava Suchiraparini Bhutopi Pachima Janata Nukam Pamanasa Ime Sakare Dugata Pannakara Bhute Patiganhatu Amhakam Digaratam Hitaya Sukhaya Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Namasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami Annamayam Buddhasa Bhagavato Pubabhaganamakaram Karamase Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Now go to page 1 through 8. Taking the 3 refuges, determining the 3 refuges. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Sangham Saranam Gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Dutiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddham Saranam Gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammam Saranam Gacchami, Tatiyampi Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Now go to the 5 precepts on page 129. Anatipata Verimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking the life of any living creature. Adinadana Verimani Sikkhapadam Samadhiyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from taking that which is not given. Kamesu vichachara verimani sikapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from sexual misconduct. Musavada verimani sikapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from lying. Surameraya vacha kamadatana verimani sikapadam samadhyami. I undertake the precept to refrain from consuming intoxicating drink and drugs which lead to carelessness. Imani pancha sikapadani silena sugatim yanti, silena bhogasampada, silena niputim yanti, tasma silam visodaye. These are the 5 precepts. Virtue is the source of happiness. Virtue is the source of true wealth. Virtue is the source of peacefulness. Therefore, let virtue be purified. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. It's about 3 times. We can now make ourselves comfortable for a 30-40 minute sit. I'll offer a few sort of guiding points to start off with, but then we'll just go into silence. It can be helpful to have a sort of background supportive voice, keeping one online, as it were, or in line. But going into complete silence for a longer period of time is good, because we then really get to see how our mind wanders all over the place, gets caught up in all sorts of narratives and stories. So we have to suffer some of that and then learn how to, quote unquote, tame it. And by taming it, it's not done by force, it's just by bringing attention, conscious attention to what we're experiencing. And it's very helpful to have an orientating point for one's meditation. The breath is the classical one, because as we live, we breathe, so it's happening as we sit, and it's a very easy one to follow. I like to recommend and suggest that we do the breathing, follow the breath, but follow it right into the whole body, not just keeping it focused around the nostrils where the air enters, which is, again, the classical way to do it. I find that we're so in our head because of society's bombardment with data of one type or another, that we want to really get out of our heads and into our bodies. And getting into the bodies means connecting with the sensations of the body. So we'll just take our time to settle and just be patient. The great austerity, the great practice of patience, of just being with what is, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It's always helpful to take a few slightly deeper in-breaths at the beginning, and just allowing the exhalation to be a real felt sense of relaxing, letting go. And that's amplified by a slight pause at the end of the out-breath. So 2 or 3 slightly deeper in-breaths with a longer exhalation. Explore what the body feels like by moving the shoulders, expanding, contracting the chest, just to release any tension that may have built up during the day. Perhaps tucking the chin in just slightly to elongate the back of the neck, so the head isn't leaning forward, placing a strain on the neck muscles. And perhaps noticing the flow of air through the nostrils, down the windpipe, through the heart region, into the lungs, into the abdomen. The air here in this room is quite cool, so we'll feel that flow of air as the temperature of the air doesn't quite match the temperature of the body. So we can feel it enter quite deep into the lungs. And try and relax around the tummy region so that the diaphragm is also allowed to move. With each in-breath, the diaphragm presses down on the inner organs, giving them a gentle massage. We carry a lot of tension in the belly, so it's nice to relax, or at least send an intention to relax, and just allow it to happen of its own accord. We're not in any battle with the body, we're just attending to its needs, welcoming it into consciousness, into awareness. So whatever it's carrying, it can put it down. Nice thing about sitting quietly like this is no demands are being made on us from the outside world. So we don't have to be anybody or do anything. We can just sit and observe, witness the sensations that arise, the quality of those sensations, what they feel like. We can notice our frame of mind, our state of mind, just as it is. Don't have to change it. We might be tense, we might be sleepy, we might be upset by something that's happened during the day. You just might feel very calm and content to be sitting quietly, not having to do anything or be anybody. So we create a field of welcoming attention to the body, to the mind. What can help in sustaining attention on, say for instance, the breath. As one could give a gentle count. So breathing in, breathing out. And one can just say 1. This is optional. Entirely up to you. Breathing in, breathing out. 2. And just observe how the count goes. But not make it a battle. Just notice how sustained attention can be sustained. Counting to 10, and then starting at the beginning again. It's just one way of developing sustained attention. So the counting becomes part of the breath on the out-breath. Seamless, integrated, present. linking the count to the sensation of the breath. You might find that you lose the count, and the mind wanders off somewhere. If that should happen, then you just smile to the mind. There it's gone again. Recognizing that, noticing that you've lost count, go back in the present, in the immediate experience of the here and now. If you're very determined and ambitious, you might get frustrated with the mind, get irritated with yourself. Just give it some slack. Give the mind a chance to stay present. It's only doing what it's been doing for many, many years. So having a kindly disposition to one's practice is really far more supportive than being unnecessarily disciplined and strict. Feel free to stretch the body, the arms, legs if you need to. And just notice how the body feels. The body should be feeling quite happy. Unless it's been a real battle. I hope not. Trying to turn the radiator on there, Stephen. The radiator could be turned on. Maybe a little bit.
It's off.
I think it's just the valve. The temperature in this room has dropped a little bit. It's amazing how much attention the body needs, how many things we have to put in place to be comfortable. I thought we might just sit quietly and just see what comes up in terms of a topic or a theme or a question. Sitting in silence as a group, is a great practice. Most social gatherings involve an enormous amount of talking, communicating. When there's less talking and more just being in quiet presence, allows us to notice more and connect more with just being, rather than having to communicate a thought or an idea or a reflection. So open space is very permission-giving, just to see what happens, see what arises. And even in sitting in sort of non-formal meditation, one can still notice the breath coming and going, body sensations coming and going. We live in a society where we're expected to do things. I remember how I was brought up, not to be idle, to use my time constructively, productively. So it's nice to be told that actually it's okay to be quiet, okay not to have to do anything, but just be present. And that's, of course, the core of our practice, is to tune in and be with the isness of the moment, with it is, with the moment just as it happens to be at this moment. All too easily we get caught up in mental constructs of thoughts, of ideas, of shoulds and shouldn'ts. I remember many years ago when I was first invited to join the monastic retreat, the winter retreat. Ajahn Chah was the abbot at the time, and he said, Nick, why don't you come along? You're very welcome to join the retreat for a few weeks. I was really quite overwhelmed by the gesture of generosity and the warmth with which I was invited. And I arrived at the monastery with all my bits and pieces, my bedding and clothes and everything. And having been on many retreats before, in different traditions, quite strict retreats, I was just struck by the sort of relaxed way I was welcomed. I was in a lovely room in a little house there called the Bodhi House, which is where guests were allowed to stay. And I was told, yeah, this is it. Use your time as you feel you need to. And I remember being really emotionally quite overwhelmed. I actually cried, just with a sense of sort of relief and sort of, this is amazing. Couldn't believe it. It felt like a gift. And then my sort of practicing self kicked in. All right, Nick, well, you've got to use this time well. You should be doing this and you should be doing that. So I decided, well, I'll just follow the routine and be the ideal meditator. Very driven in my practice. Sort of disciplining myself to make sure that I sat the full hour without moving. And of course, the poor old body would rebel. Didn't like this at all. So it'd be a great deal of resistance and suffering and pain, which I'd sort of determinedly sort of plough through. It would take me a few minutes after the sit to sort of be able to just stand, let alone walk. So a lot of discomfort. But what's really nice about persevering and trusting that one's sort of heading in the right direction, perhaps not very skillfully, but taking one's practice perhaps a little bit too seriously, but nonetheless seriously, is that with time it sort of got better. After a while, the ability to sit for longer periods of time became easier. And I don't know if it's old age or what, but it's now very easy to sit for a long period of time. There's just less stress, less tension in the body. Because our body contains so many unresolved issues from the past, from the present, from our attitude towards life. So really, having all that space and time to oneself, one can observe what happens when the mind and the body have this structured time just to be. And being is something that we can't do, because being is just being. But we tend to sort of, I think it's in the Japanese Zen tradition, they talk about having a head on top of a head, that you make yourself do things that even the head sort of overriding one's inner wisdom by the shoulds and shouldn'ts, even of practice. And then, of course, when one is sitting on a regular basis in a structured environment, one obviously has time to sort of go a bit deeper in one's practice. And quite often one can have really quite blissful moments. And of course, every time a blissful moment arises, there's something, oh, God, that's it. That's what I've been looking for. One quickly realizes at the moment there's a sort of recognition, this is it. And one sort of wants to hold on to it. It evaporates, and the good moment just disappears. So through trial and error, one sort of learns after a while not to grasp at a good experience, at a good meditation. One just allows it to happen. But then something can happen. Said in my experience, we had a really, really big blissful event. And that took years to get over, because every time I went to sit, even though I said, I'm just going to be present, somewhere in the background there was, that's where you want to go. That's what you want. Couldn't help it. And it took a lot of patience, literally years, to get out of that sort of background driver, which is just looking for fulfillment, looking for gratification, essentially. Yes, a lovely feeling. So it's through sort of trial and error like that that one gets to know one's mind, and one gets to know the habits of the mind. So even the beginnings of a nice sitting, there'd be immediately, is this it? Is this it? That little voice would say, looking for it. And of course, preventing whatever was meant to happen from happening, because the mind was active. And of course, that like is part of our personality structure. It creates things. It creates desires and wants. And even an inspired one. I mean, it's very funny. It's a good desire to want to have a good sit, one would think. But of course, it depends on who's in charge. That little voice shouldn't be in charge, but it is in charge. It seems to sort of rule the roost. And gradually, one finds that a sort of settling happens. And a much more subtle appreciation of just sitting quietly can just happen quite naturally. And at that point, one is much more in tune and in harmony with the natural order of things, which is essentially what Dhamma practice is about. It's about being in tune with nature and not creating things unnecessarily. The creating mind, the proliferating mind, which is constantly setting up standards, judgments, opinions, views, narratives. So the advantage of the benefit of doing what we were doing earlier, which was just sitting and just maybe counting the breath, using some kind of attention garnering approach, just to try and stay on track without making it into a battle and failing again and again and again. The poor old mind, you're putting it into a straitjacket. The mind isn't accustomed to being in a straitjacket. We develop so many habits over the years and patterns of thinking and behaving that this naturally emerges and manifests itself. So there is this sort of patient side that one has to approach one's practice with, just being patient and understanding. and not being too self-critical. At the same time, not suspending all criticism completely, because we need to have critical function. Critical function allows us to investigate things from a certain perspective. But then the beauty of going deeper into meditation is one just lets go of everything. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, they're allowed to arise, which they will do naturally, and they're allowed to fade. And just that ability to let go of things is such a relief. It's a shame that it tends to sort of come with age. So you spend your life practicing, and it's only towards the end of your life that you sort of could say, if you had to say it, yeah, okay, I think I've got a handle on this now. You just wish that you could say that 20 years ago and not have to wait for so long. But what is nice, of course, is to have the experience of a maturation process, a sort of a ripening, a maturing in practice, which can only really be achieved, quote unquote, through perseverance, through practice, through sustained experience over the years. It's sort of a natural learning. And then one just feels a really great sense of gratitude that one has applied oneself to one's practice or to the practice, and seeing what's the driver in that practice. The practice and the driver, or the driver of the practice, is a desire to be happy. It is where we look for that happiness that is important. And the lesson that comes through is that no thing can make us happy. No practice can really make us truly happy. Only seeing things clearly can make us happy, when there's that knowing of knowing, that witnessing, and just being with things as they are, and seeing that they're constantly changing, but finding that constant element that doesn't change, our awareness, just the awareness of being, present moment awareness. We repeat it again and again intellectually, but there's only one moment, and that's now. But if we observe the present moment, nothing is fixed in this moment. It can't be held onto in any way, or captured, or measured, or imprisoned. The present moment just is simply being in the moment. But everything that arises in the moment is constantly changing. So essentially life, one could say, is giving us this opportunity all the time just to notice the nature of reality, that all phenomena is constantly changing. And it's because change is the nature of phenomena, which is why we suffer, which of course leads us to the characteristics of existence. Existence is suffering. It can be very subtle, it can be very refined. Even the pleasures that arise in life eventually go. Even subtle, refined pleasures come and go. But there's a quite impartial background awareness which we have potential access to, which is completely non-judgmental. Anything can arise in it, and it's just noticed. Bad things, good things, sad things, happy things, whatever they are, awareness notices it. It's what we do with the things as they arise that creates the problems. We pass judgment, have opinions, have views. They are also things that arise and cease. But pure witnessing is aligning ourselves with that capacity that we all are. It's not a doing, it's an we are. It's just simply being present, being aware. Awareness does not pass judgment. Awareness does not have feelings, does not have opinions. It's like a mirror. It just reflects and notices what is. And that's why the seventh factor of enlightenment is equanimity. Equanimity. Unconditioned acceptance of the moment just as it is. And an equanimous state of mind which allows us to apperceive it, notice it, be with it. So this has profound implications for our relationships with people, with life, with situations. Every time we go into judgmental mode, warning bells should ring. Yeah. Just be careful what judgments are being passed on oneself, on others. There's a big difference between discernment, noticing the difference, and passing a judgment which implies a potential condemnation of something. So we want to go back to that background knowing, which recognizes what's helpful, what's not helpful in one's practice, in one's living. So our sitting practice, coming to events such as this, going to a meditation group, having one's own practice, creates very important opportunities to step out of judgmental mode, to step out of our habitual pattern of thinking and feeling. Just to step back, be less involved. It's like a mini retreat, a retreat in the best sense of the word, a disengagement, a disentanglement from habitual patterns of thought and action, just to create a bit of space around it. I used to find it quite strange that I'd have a happy state of mind and I'd do a so-called sitting meditation and I'd feel awful afterwards. And I think, well, that's the wrong way, that shouldn't be happening. But actually all it was showing is that whatever state of mind I had, it changed. Happy states of mind come and go. What is the well-being dependent on? Is it dependent on a state of mind, or is it on a state dependent on knowing and an acceptance of what is known? So one finds that one becomes much more tolerant, much more understanding, less critically judgmental. At the same time, one has the capacity to discern what's good, what's helpful, what's not good, what's not helpful. And it's all informed by this witnessing capacity that we have when our intuitive wisdom nature knows what to do. So after a while we learn to know what to listen to. We just simply learn to be present. So I offer those few sort of introductory reflections. I call them introductory because there's only just a few minutes of them. But if anybody would like to ask anything or say anything or bring an additional perspective to the conversation, please feel free to unmute yourself and then share it with us if you're online, or if you have somebody in this room may want to say something or ask something. Yeah, if nothing comes up or nobody says anything, it's fine. Oh yes, someone is saying, yes, is that Susan?
Yes, it is. Good evening, Nick. Thank you for your words of wisdom, as always. It's been a few weeks since I've been able to join you, so it's a great joy to be here tonight. Everything you say resonates very much with me, and similar experiences of having those moments of bliss that one wants to recapture. But I think as one gets older, as you say, equanimity becomes the greater joy, the greater prize, of greater value. And sometimes I think that perhaps it's as it should be, because it helps as we go towards death, and the equanimity gives us the possibility of approaching death with much more acceptance, and I find that of great value as I get older.
Absolutely, Susan. Thank you so much for saying that. So important. I agree. Getting old is a really very interesting experience. I can't claim to remember any past lives, so as far as I'm concerned, this is the first time. Maybe it's happened before. Who knows? I don't know. But it's really, really interesting to observe the aging process. And the sense of gratitude that one can have to the years of practice and the sort of movement towards truth and searching for meaning, when it starts paying off and one has that accepting element, that equanimity, it's still a bit difficult because, of course, one notices one's body is not functioning quite the way that it functioned before. Aches and pains, the realization that anything can happen. One simply has no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, what complaint one may end up having to go to the doctor with, and how serious it might be. So there's much more of a sort of one day at a time, and a sense of gratitude, really, to the days that do work, that one can function. I go for a run a few times a week, and I'm sort of just on one level quite amazed how wonderful to be able to run at my age and notice the birds and the trees and nature, but also know very well that it's just hanging on a thread. Anything can happen. It's not certain at all. And so that's when the fruits of practice come into fruition, as it were, as you describe, and equanimity is the key one. It really, really is.
Yes, I'm sorry. Equanimity has been so valuable in so many aspects of life and dealing with problems and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. One of the things I think about growing older, though, is I've been engaged in some in reading and practicing of some Tibetan traditions, and mm-hmm. The idea that as you approach death, you can be in a state of meditation, for example. I find that quite interesting. And it's sometimes I think that maybe that would be possible. It's something to look into more. Yeah.
And in a sense, our practice, even as sitting for longer periods of time, is a preparation for the dying process. Because when we sit for longer periods of time, we of course suffer the reactions of the body of discomfort. Well, growing old and sick and approaching death, there's a lot of discomfort from what I've witnessed of the people that I've known and been with when they were dying. So in a sense, learning how to deal with the so-called painful or unlikable aspects of life is preparing for being real, because life includes death. Life includes sickness and death. And these heavenly messengers are just reminders of how important it is for us to pay attention to what's really important and commit our energy to things that are uplifting, supportive, and, as it were, keep us going in the right direction. And the right direction, as I was saying on Saturday, is, we have this idea of a path of getting somewhere. Well, that somewhere that we have to get to is here. It's right here and it's right now. I keep on reminding myself of that it's not something over there, that it's me going somewhere. It's how one is here and now. That's where the answer lies. And being able to do that with a loving frame of mind, loving acceptance, makes it easier for everybody, I think. Makes it easier. I've witnessed some deaths which have been really truly inspiring, of people just accepting what's happening to them unconditionally. And it just creates such a different atmosphere to people who are fighting and resisting the dying process.
Yes. And this was also, of course, at the basis of the Buddha's desire to find a way to deal with the suffering of growing old, growing sick, and mm-hmm. dying. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I think it really does work.
Thank you. Yes, we have Mariano here, so I'll just repeat whatever he says to everybody.
I can't help it saying that, for those of us of a certain age, that is very much true. It is preparing for death as well. But for the younger ones, it is just that kind of sitting, that kind of staying with the staying power, with what is happening right now, generates also the energy which allows us to take what is coming next in dealing with the relationships and going out. And so it is a process of going out as well as coming back.
Yeah.
For us, it is more on the coming back. For the younger one, it's going out.
I'll sort of, I don't know how much of you've heard online what Mariana was saying, but basically what he was saying, if I can sort of transliterate or capture it, is that when one is younger, there's much more experimentation. One's going out into the world and getting involved in situations. And so there's a sort of going out and coming back, as it were, to the process of insight, what would you say?
Well, it is. I was saying that the collecting the heart is what helps in prepare us for interacting with circumstances, others as well, and good wisdom. Whereas at my age, my experience is at my age, which is right as well. It is. It leads more to solitude.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
What Mariana is suggesting is there's a greater inclination towards solitude when one gets older. Yeah. Okay. I'll have to think about that. I think what definitely happens is or can happen, is a greater capacity to be alone without feeling lonely.
Yeah.
It's one is sort of more contained potentially, not in an isolating way, but quite the opposite, just a very calm, accepting way. And there's less need for stimulation, less need for interaction with other people. It's very enjoyable when it happens, but it's not so necessary to one's sort of psychological well-being as it might be when it's younger. Good, I've just got a thumbs up from Mariana. I've obviously communicated that and got the message there. But maybe some of you have a different perspective. I don't know. Do feel free to share your perspective if you would like to. Eliana, yes.
Yes. It resonates what Mariano says, because also the more you practice, in a way, you are selective with respect to the people you want to spend time with.
Yes, one becomes more selective, yes.
Yeah, all this like superficial conversation is not...
Yes.
Perhaps we prefer to be alone or with a community of like-minded people that support this practice that is so important. So the priority is perhaps to grow in the practice and not to be with whoever, no?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that we are not compassionate with other people, but the mind wants other things in a way.
Sure. Yes, I've noticed that one can often tell a person by the company they keep, by the people they have in their lives as friends. I remember in my early days when I sort of discovered the Buddha Dhamma and realized that I had to really change some things quite radically. I lost a lot of very good friends, actually, but those friends were into going to the pub and drinking and smoking and looking for pleasures. And I suddenly realized that actually that it wasn't grabbing my attention anymore. I just realized that wasn't the way to go. So on one level it was sad because they were nice people. They weren't bad people. They weren't alcoholics or drug addicts or anything. They were just ordinary young people, just like I was. But something got triggered into action when coming across the sort of the teachings, when I realized that I had to make some decisions which immediately started changing the emotional sort of psychological landscape that I lived in, and that had an impact on the people one would mix with. So now I feel very rich. I have so many good friends, and they're all, almost without exception, if they're not explicitly into the Dhamma, they certainly are in terms of quality of people. So I feel very, very blessed that they're just having everybody here and having people on the screen and being able to talk the way we are. That's wonderful. It's spiritual friendship. It's just absolutely amazing. And the nice thing is, the psychologists tell us, of course, and psychological studies show us, that if one has a context, a spiritual community, one is healthier and one lives longer. So one's deferring the dying process most probably a little bit.
Is that a promise?
That's not a promise. Yeah, thank you, Eliana.
Nick.
Yes, Randula.
I was just thinking what Mariana was saying about as you get older, you feel more content or not wanting, less lonely. But I think it's not about getting older. Maybe it's more about people who practice, because I do come across a lot of elderly people who do feel very lonely.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And the more older you get, they actually feel more isolated, and they want to connect with the communities. And so I think it's perhaps more to do with our experience in the practice, that we are finding it more content and more comfortable to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the reason one's linking the age with it is because one's had so much practice. It just comes with time. You know, that's why in traditional societies there's so much respect for elders. They've lived longer. They're wiser as a result of living longer. So it's not just because they're old, but they have lived longer and had more opportunities to learn the lessons that life has to teach them. So that's where the connection is. But yes, you're quite right. It is to do with practice. But it's a combination of the two, I think. Because if one constantly sees the truth of the consequences of one's action, and one is investing in good actions, in basically practicing right effort, then the fruits come. And the more one does it, quote unquote, the more merit one gains, if one wants to look at it in those sort of categories. But yes, absolutely, you're quite right. It's not age on its own. It's how the age has been, how time has been used by the aged person that matters. Yeah, very true. Thank you. Yes, Will.
I was using sound of silence, inspired by Ajahn Chah recently, and I sort of just listening there is I've noticed that you can hear silence. It's not an emptiness. It has to be silence of something, and you have to have a perception of what that silence is. And sort of long story short, it feels like there's always a hearing going on, whether it's a sound or not a sound. So whether something exists or doesn't exist, there's something always in the background, and it feels like so you could take that into life as a sort of pushing away of a non-existent part of ourselves, but constantly trying to find the things that exist and seem real without all the space that surrounds it. It feels like a whole denying part of ourselves, which isn't there almost. I don't know quite how to explain it, but
I'll try and translate. I don't know if people online have heard what Will had to say. Yes, no? 50-50, right, okay. I'll do my best to to translate. Will is referring to the practice of the sound of silence, which is a practice that Ajahn Chah has written about, and you can find texts online as well as in written form in publications. And it's basically being able to have this sense of a constant background something, I'll just describe it as, rather than necessarily a sound, which is essentially a way of connecting with this background knowing, background awareness. That's what the link is about in Ajahn Sumedho's teachings, and in teachings on the sound of silence, which is actually an ancient Indian practice. I think it's called Shabda, if I remember rightly, but I don't want to be quoted on that. So even as we're sitting here, there's a sort of, one can hopefully notice that there's sort of a knowing that one is sitting here. There's a knowing of the sensations, a knowing of the words that are being said, an understanding of the words, and it's like a sort of constant presence. And actually that constant presence is just basically the now moment in which stuff is arising. So just realizing that there is this timeless present moment awareness all of the time, stuff flows through it. as opposed to us being on a journey. This stuff just flows through the silent stillness of being present. So that's how I would convert what you've just said.
Yes, and that link to sort of death, you can know that something exists, but you can also know that it doesn't exist. There's something that can notice both.
Can notice both existence and non-existence.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you, Will. Yeah. Well, because of course what is being known is constantly changing. It has no essential substance. It appears to be present, and it is in a sense present, but it's actually changing all of the time. So what we're looking for is the timeless aspect of it, which is ungraspable, which is actually being present, being aware. It's awareness. So I'm aware of time. We have a few minutes to 8 o'clock. It'd be nice if we ended on a chant. We're going to run a little bit late. I hope people don't have trains to catch or television programs to watch or whatever you've got planned for the evening. So it'd be nice to go to the verses of sharing and aspiration, which is really a nice way of sharing our practice and the goodness that comes from our practice. So on page 33 of the chanting book, for those who are using the book, and thank you, Randula, for putting up the screen share. Just wait for everybody's time. Yeah. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life, may they soon attain the threefold bliss, and realize the deathless, through the goodness that arises from my practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. So we send that sentiment out into the ether, into the world. May it reach everyone. So we'll go to the closing homage. Page 28 at the bottom, closing homage. Or we can do page 16 and just chant it in Pali. Thank you, Randula. So the formal way to do it is to ring this beautiful gong. Araham Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi Swakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammam Nasami Supatipanno Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangham Namami. Right. That brings our evening meeting to an end. Thank you very much for joining us, or for coming in one form or another. I hope you all have a good week ahead, and can't remember who's doing the class next week. It might be Randula or Martin, one of those two. Probably, is it you, Randula? Yes, Randula's nodding, so you'll have Randula here next week in the hot seat. So wish you all well, and farewell. Bye-bye.